So there is some developing news surrounding our relationship with the nation of Israel, our closest ally. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu canceled plans to send a delegation to Washington. This after the UN Security Council approved a resolution that called for an immediate ceasefire in the Jewish state's war against Hamas. The resolution passed Security Council 14-0, and the U.S. abstained. We could have exercised our veto power, but we did not. And Netanyahu said enough is enough. The Prime Minister's office says it represented a clear retreat from the consistent position of the United States and the Security Council since the beginning of the war. And it's pretty shameful that the Biden administration did this. Well, I want to bring into the conversation a good friend of this program, talking about Congressman Pat Fallon from the great state of Texas. Congressman, good to have you with us today.
I've said it once, I'll say it before. Todd Starnes equals great American. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Really frustrated, though, with what the administration did here, Congressman. I mean, this is really a slap in the face to our greatest ally.
Todd, it's a brutal stab in the back. It is a betrayal. And, I've asked by these protesters in the halls of the Capitol, do you support a ceasefire? And I say, I support the destruction of Hamas. And Israel is taking great care to protect its civilians. And there would be fewer civilians harmed if it weren't for the fact that Hamas uses those Palestinians as human shields, and the Hamas fighters themselves oftentimes don't wear uniforms. In fact, it's the norm rather than the rule. So, or rather than the exception. So, it's a horrible situation. But every single casualty in Gaza is the fault of Hamas at this point. It has nothing to do with the IDF.
And Congressman, it's worth repeating here. We still have Americans being held hostage by Hamas.
Yeah.
I believe six. I believe is the last number I heard.
Yeah, and this immediate ceasefire that the UN Security Council passed. Well, I'm sorry. What about the return of the hostages? That's not included here. We're asking Israel to show restraint that we didn't. Unreasonable restraint, quite frankly. We weren't all help out on restraint and ceasefires after 9/11. We were focused on getting rid of the Taliban and hunting down Al Qaeda, as we should have been. And this is proportionally worse for the Israelis than that awful event that we had 20 plus years ago. So Israel, we need to support them. We need to send the weapons. We need to, and you know what? They've shown, Todd, over decades that they are to be trusted. And they're not perfect. Neither are we. No nation state is. But they are a functioning democracy, and they're our greatest ally in the region.
And they have every right to defend themselves, and they have every right to stop these terrorists from killing Jews on Israeli soil. It's unacceptable.
You know what, Todd, I made a point to one of the administration's hack came and testified in front of the Armed Services Committee and was trying to play, use talk out of both sides of her mouth as far as Hamas and the IDF. And what I asked her simply was, who do you find responsible for the 20,000 French civilians that were killed in Normandy in 1944, in the summer of 1944? Was it our fault? Was it Vichy France, Free France, or Nazi Germany? She actually said it was the United States' fault, which is remarkable and very telling. Of course it wasn't. It was Nazi Germany's fault, because this war wouldn't have begun had it not been for Hitler's aggression. And what's happening in Gaza wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Hamas butchering 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians. So really, at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. There's blood's on their hands.